John here, guys, and today we're talking about the new Nebula Pro. Now, as you know, the Caddx Vista
Hasta la vista, baby.
has been out of stock at a lot of places, and we've been clamoring for a true alternative. Caddx came out with their Nebula camera. It was a nano camera at first, and it was terrible, horrible, a crime against humanity. Recently, Eachine got them to make a branded version. This is actually a micro camera. It has a giant lens on board, and we're also going to test this out to see how it compares. Spoiler alert, it's not as good, but it is good for something, because recently this was on sale for 87 bucks for the whole shebang. But what we really want to focus on is the Nebula Pro. This is Caddx's finally a version out there that gets rid of some of the gripes of the original Nebula. Now, the main gripes of the Nebula were three things at launch. There was a terrible screen tearing, ghosting effect that has since been fixed with software updates. Two, there was a very milky, hazy image quality to the image itself. And three, it could only do 60 FPS. So it was half the frame rate of the Vista or Air unit, which caused you to have really a terrible, almost like a laggy feel. It felt very disconnected, disjointed. It was difficult for me to fly even on smaller quads. This has reduced, hopefully, all three. The frame rate now does the full 120 frames per second that the other DJI cameras do. So that's eliminated. The screen tearing is eliminated. What about the image itself? Well, it should be fairly close because they're actually using the same lens that they use on the DJI Camera. So, whoa, this unit does save you 4 to 5 grams over the Vista. It uses the same video transmitter unit that the Vista uses, the same antenna. So the only difference is the camera. This is a micro size, meaning it's 19 millimeters across instead of 20 millimeters on the DJI Camera. And so, after looking at the footage, I can say it's really close. There's something about that DJI camera though that just, it looks a little bit better, but I can't put my finger on it. When I first turned this on, it had sort of a slight, and I'm talking about slight. These cameras' qualities are definitely within 5 or 10% of each other, but there was a slight milkiness, a slight haze to this Nebula Pro. And I felt like the image looked a bit flatter, whereas the DJI Vista combo looked a little bit more saturated. Now, that's not necessarily a good or bad thing, because if you're going to do color correction afterwards, you actually want a flatter image. And I did notice that once I just bumped the saturation up one click on this, it was actually very difficult to tell them apart. This one is fully 16:9 switchable. You can adjust all of the camera settings in the DJI goggles that you can with the regular DJI units, whereas on the Nebula you cannot. So is this a true alternative? Well, the problem is you only save about 4 or 5 grams. A lot of frames now are designed for the 20 millimeter camera size of the original DJI system, so this will be a little smaller. This is nice though, because this can fit into pretty much any frame that is not designed for the new DJI camera. But the thing is, it's only 1 millimeter apart, so most frames you can squeeze that DJI camera in, so that's really almost a non-issue. I would love this if it was $130 or so, but it's not. It's $148.99. They did increase the price of the Vista unit, so now it's $160. So there's a $12 difference here. But the DJI Camera has been proven to be one of the most durable camera cases of all time. I've never broken one. It's just so good. So is it worth saving that tiny little bit of size savings and tiny little bit of weight savings? I mean, only 4 or 5 grams. I wish it was lighter. I wish it was cheaper. If you had the alternative, when would you choose this? Mainly on like the smallest of builds, right? It's just, I'm glad that there's something else on the market that's totally acceptable And if I can't get a hold of a Vista because they are out of stock on some kind of drought, I'll be plenty happy to run this. In fact, it's actually a little bit harder than you would think to tell which one is which when you're actually flying. So good job on making it an alternative, but why make it a apples to apples alternative? I want a lower price alternative. I want it to be the price of the original Nebula. Why are you jacking up the price, Caddx? Ugh. Now let's talk very quickly about this Eachine version of the Vista kit. This is the Eachine Nebula Micro. The image is improved from the original Nebula, but it is still, it just looks lower quality. The frame rate no longer bothers me, and I'll tell you what this is good for, because you can get the whole thing for 87 bucks if you can still catch that sale on Banggood. And why is that notable? Because normally just the video transmitter unit alone is $100. That doesn't come with a camera, that doesn't come with an antenna. So you can get all three of these things for less than the price of just this. Yes, please. I will not recommend installing this on a 5-inch, but if you're building up a Cinewhoop like I did, I actually moved this camera onto my Cinespore because it's never going to be going fast enough. If you're going slow, the frame rate being half, it really doesn't bother you. You can't notice it hardly at all. So that's totally fine for my needs. I ordered 4 of these. Because there's just certain builds. If I'm building a 2.5-inch or a 3-inch where I'm not going to be going fast, why not save the money? The camera is going to fit in more places because it's 19 millimeters. The image is improved. It's still not nearly as good. So I made like a little scale. If the DJI Air unit is at 100, then the Nebula Pro is like 90, 95. It's super close. This is like 70. The original Nebula is like 55. And analog would be like 40. All right, so there's your scale of like percentage wise. How do these compare? This is definitely a compromise. It's still better than analog, but for the price, this is nice in certain situations. The Nebula Pro though, it's given us all we wanted except a reduction in price.
Seems expensive.
Seems.
Is the camera cage gonna hold up? I can't quite tell if it's a very thin metal or a very thick plastic. And it's just frustrating, Caddx. Why? Why go through all this trouble to finally give us a true alternative? Are you just banking on the fact that the Vista is gonna be out of stock all the time? Why give it to us at almost the same price point? It needs to be cheaper.
I am not cheap.
Lower the price, and then it'll really